Shri D.K. Sekri, Chairperson, Competition Commission of India, Ms. Samita Jingran, Secretary, Competition Commission, Honorable Mr. Justice T.K. Jain, and Justice Arjun Sekri, my colleagues at the Supreme Court, Honorable Acting Chief Justice and other Honorable Judges of the Delhi High Court and other courts, Mr. Maninder Singh, Additional Solicitor General for India, Mr. R.S. Suri, President of the Supreme Court Bar Association, Mr. Salman Khurshid, former Union Law Minister, learned senior advocates, members of the bar, ladies and gentlemen. As a judge of the High Court, at least where I was a judge at the High Court, one encounters no litigation at all from the Competition Commission. So one is really unaware of the nuances of what this is all about. When the legislation was enacted, and I wanted to know what this is all about, I read an article which had a joke, and it explained to me what Competition Commission was all about. Over the years, I've thought of this joke, and the more the law progresses, the more the joke makes things visibly clear. So may I share this joke with you? Little Brahmin priest in Mathura, and he really seriously wanted to meet the Pope at the Vatican. So he continued to make requests to the Pope. And eventually, a few years later, his request was granted, so he went all the way to the Vatican. And there is a lot of difference between Mathura and Vatican, so when he went there, he was amazed at the buildings and the arches. And when he entered the Vatican, he saw the tall pillars and the beautiful marble flooring and the grandeur of the place. Well, eventually he reached the Pope's office. So the Pope was sitting behind his desk. So they had their little conversation, they exchanged pleasantries, spoke about one another's religion. And then this little priest asks him, "What is this red instrument lying there?" So the Pope said, "This is my direct hotline to God." So he says, "Do you mind if I speak to God?" "Oh, welcome." So he picks the phone, no connecting line, but straight hotline to God. So he had his conversation with God. He says his prayer. He thanks God for everything. And he's done in about 5 minutes. He's very grateful to the Pope because there was never an occasion for him to talk to God. So as he was moving out, the Pope tells him that would be $75. $75? What do? You have taken the facility, so you have to pay the $75. Indian priest from Mathura pays $75 and says, "Thank you very much," comes back. A few years later, it happens that the Pope was visiting India. So he remembered this priest from Mathura having come and met him. So he says, "Can I meet him?" So eventually it was decided, yes, you could meet him. So he goes to Mathura. And he goes to this little small hut. And he puts his head down and gets in. There's all darkness inside. So after some time, this Little priest is sitting behind a small table. There is another chair by, so the Pope sits at the chair, and then they exchange their pleasantries again. And the Pope notices there is an instrument here as well. So the Pope asks him, what is this? He says, this is my hotline to God. He says, when I saw yours, I thought I must have mine. So he says, there's a lot of botheration of late. Things are not good in the Christian world, so can I have a conversation with God? He says, okay. So again, that cordless phone picks up and says hello to God, talks about the abortion laws in the US and in the West, talks about the evolution of society in Europe and in England, talks about the gay problems that encounter the church, talks about everything, says his prayer, says his goodbyes. He's very happy. From 5 minutes, it takes to 15, from 15 to half an hour, and eventually 1 hour. So the Pope asks him, how much would that be? So this poor priest thinks and says, oh, just 2 rupees. The Pope had charged him $75 because it was a great distance. It wasn't an international cause. It was a call to God. So he says, how come it is 2 rupees for you? He says, we have a local call with God. So our call is very cheap and it's very local. So over the years, when I've thought of this joke, I've thought of how much it cost to make the call, whether the first charge was excessive, whether the next charge was lower than it ought to be. What was it all about? And when you look at the Competition Commission and the judges, the matters that come before it, that's all it is all about. Well, that's joke which taught me about Competition Commission. Competition law is an enforceable ethic to which activity it applies, to whichever activity it applies, sports, business, agriculture, industry or services. Its potency is contextual. India's colonial political economy suppressed the Indian spirit of enterprise. It also expelled any flourishing Indian manufacture that rivaled the equivalent British manufacturer. Competition with the goods of the colonial power was wiped out as a rule of governance. Imperial law was the instrument for this end. Indian textiles were the classical case of ruin and misery by such politically directed legal behavior. The English board would survey potentially rival Indian businesses. The British Commercial Statistical Intelligence provided the database for such economic administration of India. Independence became a necessity. India arrived at its constitutional destiny with this painful lesson on competition as an engine of public interest growth and socio-economic justice. Accordingly, it framed a constitution that nationally captured the essence of the competing human spirit and recognized the laissez-faire abuse. The clear constitutional understanding is that economic policy and management must enable the achievement of the constitutional social order defined in Article 38, which, in the particular, strives to minimize income and opportunity, inequalities amongst individuals, groups of people having different vocations, and residing in different areas. National economic management of the income production process that does not give equality of opportunity defeats the achievement of such a social order, which can be achieved only by economic governance being tied down to subserving the common good and preventing the common detriment. Every government is bound to ensure the two fundamental principles of competition: ownership and control of resources for the common good, and an economic system that does not work to the common detriment. Government businesses is equally bound by these principles. The issue is not of private and/or public enterprise. The extension of benefits to all constitutional principles is the duty of the governing political party. This has to be done without infringing fundamental and constitutional limits. That is why the Competition Act 2002 defines enterprise in Section 2H to mean a person or the government engaged in any activity in the whole range of investment and production, up to the delivery of goods and services. The only exception is the activity of the government relating to sovereign functions, which for the central government include atomic energy, currency, defense, and space. The twin goals with the fundamental rights of fair, just, and reasonable state conduct in management of political economy constitute the boundaries of a host of laws, including the control of monopolies and restrictive business practices and agreements. As with many things human, which go in pairs, the economic development in India gave rise to an economic greed, working to the detriment of development itself. India brought in the controlling legislation of the Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969. Paradigm could only be the thought through control and prohibition. When by 1990 the administered economy was found to be working to the common detriment, the political economy of the globalized regulated market, liberalization started replacing the administered economy. The feeble markets of the 1950s had by the 1990 become major income and wealth production markets. With the serious problems of non-transparent political management of resources that tended to seriously retard the achievement of the social order mandated by the Constitution. Agreements, combinations, and dominance in the competition to earn more from new and larger business became necessary. The nature of this competition determined job growth through allocation of resources. It affected prices of goods and services and therefore consumer demand. There was a necessity to keep a check on the competition for more, to enable the fulfillment of the twin constitutional goals of subserving the common good and preventing common detriment. The answer was to replace the controls of Monopolies and Restrictive Trade Practices Act 1969 by the nuanced regulation of the Competition Act 2002 to encourage competition and rein in its abuse, not on any dogmatic basis or the per se rule, but on the reasoned basis of the rule of reason. This kind of relationship of fairness between the manufacturer-supplier on the one hand and the consumer on the other is possible only if the stream of supply and demand remains unpolluted. Greed pollutes the stream. There is, as yet, no vaccine against greed. Hence, the Competition Commission is a necessity to prevent, control, and abate such pollution. The doctrine of the level playing field is the constitutional answer to the displacement of the competition to the common detriment. A Competition Commission becomes a necessity to enforce this doctrine. The Competition Act does this by imposing a national monitoring function on the Commission to ensure fair competition. An armada of powers concerning agreements and combinations, having an appreciable adverse effect on competition, as also abuse of dominant position, a range of remedies of financial deterrence, including the power to issue interim orders, combined with the principles of natural justice. In the Steel Authority of India case, the Supreme Court in 2010 pointed out that under the scheme of the Act, the Commission is vested with inquisitorial, investigative, regulatory, adjudicatory, and to a limited extent, advisory jurisdiction. It further stated that vast powers had been given to the Commission to deal with complaints or information leading to invocation of the provisions of Section 3, anti-competitive agreements, Section 4, abuse of dominant position, read with Section 9, which specifies the factors to be considered by the Commission for purposes of Sections 3 and 4. Similarly, through Sections 29 and 30, the Commission has been empowered to investigate combinations. Under Section 27, discontinuance or modification of anti-competitive agreements, and Section 28, division of dominant enterprise, and Section 31(3), discontinuance or modification of a combination, the Commission can pass a range of orders to effectuate its aim of eliminating anti-competitive practices. It is a dominant enterprise is indulging in if a dominant enterprise is indulging in exploitative pricing, that is, selling goods or services below the cost of manufacture, then it can determine the cost of such manufacture under the Determination of Cost of Production Regulations 2009. The provisions of the Act, read with the General Regulations of 2009, framed by the Commission under Section 64, show that the matters related to contravention of the Act have to be dealt with expeditiously and in a time-bound manner. Effective jurisdiction is in no way delay jurisdiction. Otherwise, the purpose of the Act in ensuring an open market and thereby preventing damage to the country's economy gets frustrated. The provisions of the Act and of the 2009 regulations, as well as the regulations of 2011 on procedure of transaction of business relating to combinations, exhibit the legislative intention of a time-bound disposal. The Competition Commission has the jurisdiction to levy monetary penalties for the payment of which time can be extended or alternatively into payments by installments under the manner of recovery of monetary penalty regulations 2011. The Commission ensures this public interest exercise through the examination of laws and policies under the 2016 Guidelines for Competition Assessment of Economic Legislations and Policies, issued by it under Sections 49(1) and 3 of the Act. This function of continuously scanning and identifying law and policies and for their effect on competition, and then taking these up for a time-bound assessment through experts, which constitutes the preventive aspect of the Commission's 4 mandatory duties under Section 18. Under Section 6(2), persons entering or proposing to enter into a combination can seek approval for the combination from the Commission. They do not have to wait for the Commission to move in the matter on its own or for someone to complain. This is reinforced by Section 31(3). The globalization of trade and capital has resulted in the Commission having extraterritorial jurisdiction under Section 32. And this is very interesting. Its power to inquire into an agreement, a dominant position, or a combination having a likely to have an appreciable adverse effect on competition in the relevant market in India continues even if the agreement, the party, the abuse, or the combination is outside India. The Commission therefore becomes a global watchdog of transactions, having an effect on competition in India. This unprecedented jurisdictional span of the Commission is tethered to 2 elastic concepts: enterprise and relevant market. They say that to define is to limit. However, in the case of the Commission, it seems to be otherwise. The unit to which the breaches of competition, agreements, or dominant position abuse or combinations that have an appreciable adverse effect on competition apply is an enterprise. Under Section 60 of the Competition Act, its provisions have effect notwithstanding anything inconsistent therewith contained in any other law for the time being in force. Section 62 mandates that the provisions of the Act are in addition to and not in derogation of the provisions of any other law for the time being in force. In the light of these two sections, what happens if the issue raised before it involves the Copyrights Act and the Patents Act? The Commission's broad answer is that as cross-sector regulator, the competition aspect falls within its jurisdiction. In HT Media Limited versus Super Cassettes Industries Limited, the Commission pointed out that it recognizes the role of sectoral regulators like the board and its exercise jurisdiction accordingly. In this case, the Copyright Board under the Copyright Act had nothing to do with eliminating market practices, which had an adverse effect on competition in the market, or works protected by the Copyright Act. Hence, it had the jurisdiction to decide the competition issue raised before it. Telephone Active Bolgate LM Ericsson was a case where the Delhi High Court judged the issue of patents and the Competition Act. Micromax and Intex alleged that Ericsson, having a large portfolio of standard essential patents in respect of technologies used in mobile handsets and network stations, had abused its dominant position. The Commission held that the royalties demanded by Ericsson did not have any link to the patented product, and they were contrary to the fair, reasonable, and non-discriminatory regime under which Ericsson had the patents. Ericsson approached the High Court against this order, contending that the Commission had no jurisdiction in the matter, as any issue regarding the claim of royalty would fall under the Patents Act and not under the Competition Act. The High Court concluded that the remedies of abuse of patents under the two acts were different. Two undefined concepts underpin the vast jurisdiction of the Commission. Guided by the definitions of enterprise and relevant market under sections 2H, 2T, 19 subsections 6 and 7, these two concepts are competition and appreciable adverse effect of the breach of competition within the relevant market in India. The reason for not defining these is because both the statutory concepts are evidence-based conclusions which trigger consequential powers of the Commission, ranging from imposition of penalties to ordering divisions of an enterprise. An evidence-based approach is adopted in the exercise of jurisdiction on the rule of reason. The only exception is Section 3.3, wherein an appreciable adverse effect of a decision, practice, or agreement is presumed if it results in 4 kinds of specific consequences. Even here, the presumption is rebuttable. This makes the work of the Commission both inter- and multidisciplinary. Given the expansive jurisdiction of the Commission, its power to say yes or no as to the existence of a prima facie case becomes crucial before a High Court high-pressure point for the informant and the enterprise complained against. This is more so because the Supreme Court, in Steel Authority of India in 2010, held that the Commission is under no legal obligation to hear the parties while framing its prima facie opinion, and further, that it had only to give some and not detailed reasons for its opinion. And lastly, its prima facie opinion order is not appealable under the Act. 5 years later, the Delhi High Court, in the Google case in 2015, held that the Commission can review its prima facie order as the formation of an opinion by it about the existence or non-existence of a prima facie case is an administrative act. It is a matter of some concern that even at the stage of hearing after the prima facie opinion and investigation, there are natural justice problems, as shown by orders of the Competition Appellate Tribunal. And this is a point of concern for us today. Quite a few orders of the Appellate Tribunal show a failure on this front. In Chemist and Druggist Federation, Firozpur, the Appellate Tribunal found that the Commission had not served a notice on the office bearers. In Lafarge India Limited, the Appellate Tribunal held that it could not be held that no prejudice had been caused to the appellants by the participation of the then chairperson of the Commission in signing the order when he had not heard the matter. In Messrs. Escorts Limited, it found inter alia that the procedure adopted by the Commission was in violation of the principles of natural justice. In Dr. L.H. Hiranandani Hospital, the Appellate Tribunal raised the issue why no effort was made on the part of the Director General while investigating the case to seek information from the person who was presumed to have faced the abusive conduct. In Himachal Pradesh Society of Chemists and Druggists Alliance, the Appellate Tribunal held that the investigation conducted by the Director General was in violation of the principles of natural justice, and it had relied upon forged and fabricated documents. In Messrs. Surinder Prasad, the Appellate Tribunal found that the Commission had ignored the Supreme Court judgment in Messrs. BSN Joshi and Sons Limited, even though the informant had cited the judgment. Interestingly, during the years 2015-16, 30% of the Commission's order on the existence of a prima facie case, closing cases on contravention recommendation of the Director General and hearing of the parties, orders on dominant enterprise and interim orders were appealed. And 40% of these orders were set aside by the Appellate Tribunal. The competitive, fair democracy ensures equality and justice in all spheres to make life a holistic pleasure and more persons. For more and more persons, automation and artificial intelligence that goes on reducing earning opportunities for many at the cost of putting more and more gains in fewer hands become self-defeating by the constant reduction of consumer and demand. Fair competition demands a public interest governance policy. The contrary tells the truth about the nature of the society we live in. The Young Competition Commission is on a noble national mission in terms of its vision and mission. I wish it all the best in its mission of civilizing market power to fulfill the preamble of the Constitution of India through the rule of law, which is the rule of reason. I would like to thank, before I close, Mr. Sekhri for giving this opportunity to me to make this address. I would also like to thank you for your patience and for your kindness to be here.